Alfred has been on the forefront of digital transformation in financial services since 1997. Her executive-level expertise straddles digital transformation, customer experience, and customer acquisition. During her time with Fortune 200 company Progressive, she held a central leadership role in customer experience and e-commerce initiatives that revolutionized the way the auto insurance industry reached and engaged potential and existing customers across various interactive points, from the highly recognized award-winning Progressive.com to the patented Name Your Price tool. Most recently, Toby played a similar role at Goldman Sachs, bringing Marcus by Goldman Sachs, a personal online lending platform, to life. As a founding managing director, Toby headed up customer acquisitions, playing a key role defining the product, the site, and the marketing strategy for successful launch and growth of Marcus. Toby currently consults with insurance and financial service companies across the U.S.
Thank you so much, Toby. I'm so looking forward to our next few minutes together, especially as we talk about the customer. And I guess I want to begin by getting, just maybe some long range perspective, not philosophically, but more so to stage where we are in time, and kind of the path before us. If you're looking at strategy, which is, we've heard about the customer for years. And so, some would say they've always, they've been customer focused. But what's different now? Is it, what's different about how we relate to the customer and what makes good customer strategy, customer experience?
I think what's really different is customers have really higher expectations than they did. And it's not to say that they were lower before, but when they see really valuable processes and easy processes in other industries, that's what they begin to expect from everything. And why not? And we can deliver them. And so let's make sure that we're really thinking about what's the customer looking for, and then how do you deliver it best? So when I think about what's changing, it's the elevation of the customer expectation. So take it up a notch. Think about end-to-end experiences, but obviously when we're working on customer experience, we think about processes. And you think about, how do I divide this up into chunks that are both actionable and easy to manage, so that I keep thinking about, how do I move it along in little chunks? It's like cooking up a train. And very much so putting it all together to say, how do I think about each individual action so that it's easier and smooth and well understood by the customer?
Definitely.
So as I think about, how does it evolve? It evolves both, I'm going to say both rapidly and slowly, because it's difficult to do it all at once. But if you think about, sort of like experiences, and I'm going to go back a little bit to sort of when Amazon started and it was just all delivery by Amazon. But you ordered on Amazon, your stuff showed up really, whatever you ordered showed up really quick. It showed up in a box that very much said, this is from Amazon. There's a purpose to their logo being a smile on your face. And you think about that sort of end-to-end experience, which when it first started, people were absolutely amazed. Like, well, this happened, and 4 days later or something, I have something at my door. And that's what we're going to be trying to deliver throughout insurance, where it does put a smile on somebody's face versus, oh, the drudgery, I've got to do insurance today.
It makes a ton of sense. And it's, what I hear is that you're right in that, we're aiming for the smile. And it's funny because as you describe this, it reminded me of years ago, we used to kind of say when you're having difficulty tracking a claims or, something like that, but you could track a FedEx package, you would say to insurers, the day is going to come where that's no longer going to be an acceptable answer. And what you're saying is, guess what? It's here. The expectations are now with a customer that they want this experience from end to end. So let me ask the easy question. Who's the customer, Toby?
I truly believe it's the end customer, but the agent is your intermediary. And, whether it's an in-house agent or, an exclusive agent or an independent agent, the agent is your intermediary who, one, you have to attract, because you have to have a good product that they are willing to sell. And then, you also have to have a product that works easily for them as well. So when you think about the whole customer journey, it's not just merely the end customer, but it's all the points along the delivery. Because if one doesn't execute the way you want, and that's obviously harder in an independent agent channel, you really, have to be making sure is how do we get towards the kind of execution that is what we expect for our customers.
Got it.
Toby, let me just ask you to break it down a little bit in a few places. That, if you think about an insurance product, there's kind of the pre-sale, there's maybe some customer service, and then something bad happens is actually the next thing that happens. And then you're dealing with somebody who's not smiling, right?
Right.
When you think about it, and I guess let's talk just personal lines. When you think about it, how do you really, what are the critical moments and what do you think are the key elements when you think about customer that you're really trying to get at?
I mean, what you're trying to get at, one is obviously as you're pre-selling to the customer, how do they, do they find that your product is valuable? Is this something that's important to them? And it's not just a mandatory product, but, even for the mandatory products, this product is going to meet my needs. So making sure they understand what they would be potentially buying, ease them through the onboarding process, and then, make it clear when they are onboarded that they have the information that they need in case something bad happens. And then as you think about the customer experience when something bad happens, obviously in personal lines, in auto, the big first question you ask is, was anybody injured? And, that's done for multiple reasons. It's one, obviously to show you care, but it's also done to triage because, if somebody's injured, it's a more complex claim. So as you think about it, what you're trying to do is really work to try to ease people's mind. And, as Marie mentioned, the comment is, if you could track a FedEx package, can you track a claim? And frankly, this should be for any level type of claim, whether it's personal lines or commercial. But thinking about, what do I need to tell the person so that they understand what's happening? Because when people don't understand is when they get angry, and also when they start calling, because they're frantic at that point. And I'm accelerating it. But when people don't understand, they get agitated. And you don't want people to be agitated. You want this to be as simple as possible and, resolve the claim, sooner, because we all know that when you do that, they resolve for less. So
that makes a ton of sense.
It's all connected because you can connect, positive customer experience to the bottom line. And I know lots of, companies struggle with, well, how do I make that connection? But the more satisfied your customer is along the journey, the more easier it is going to be for you and less costly. So as you think about it, it's keeping them informed during the process, and meeting their expectations. So I was reading an interesting article about claims where it said a lot of things are about diarying. So you put it in your diary,
right,
something to pop up in another week. And, it pops up in case you didn't do anything else versus saying, how do I make sure that happens in less than a week? And it, was sort of an interesting view because it's saying, well, if the customer expectation is this shouldn't take a week, why do we diary it for a week? Yeah. It's just, as I thought about it, yes, there are processes and sometimes there's lots of back and forth that you have to go through, but, and gathering information from multiple parties and, investigating the claim thoroughly. But the question is can it be done in a shorter period of time? Because, frankly, who knew that we needed, FedEx next day delivery, 30 years ago?
Absolutely. And I think what you're saying here is really good. I mean, you're kind of walking us through, the experience and the process and these key moments and clearly the way in which you think about the claims process is a critical moment and really kind of diving into that so you can improve upon it. If we were, Toby, to kind of move to the front of this process, how can carriers understand how to get the right customer and what type of experience or product that they want? How do you start this? How do you find them?
Oh, that's a multi-pronged question because there's.
I try.
It's very much a multi-pronged question because there's who is your product meant to serve, and do you have the right segmentation and pricing within that to serve the groups that you expect, so that you're not being adversely selected against, and you can't fulfill because your loss ratio is not going to be very pretty at the end of the day.
So does this mean you're leading us to market research? Is that?
Yeah, there is definitely, is what does the customer need? So am I building a product that's going to suit their needs? Am I going to build a product that fits into my product, group as well? So does it, help my customers and my agents ladder up to more sales? And think about, grouping and acquiring more products from the company. So how does it fit into sort of the customer's journey and the niches that they need in product? Then who is that? And then how do you reach them, obviously, is the next question. So if it's a broad market product, it's easy, is you really don't have all that much segmentation unless you're going for a specific group in that, where you want to say, like let's say about bundling. You want to be hitting people who bundling is important to. You want to hit people at transitions where they're thinking about switching or acquiring, so that you're going to have, frankly, a lower cost of acquisition, because it's a lot harder to get, say, me to move versus somebody who's recently purchased a home. And, sure.
You just said something that I thought was like astoundingly interesting that I wanted to jump in on. You sort of mentioned broad market product, and it scratched an itch that I'm always struggling with, which is like, how long can we study personas? How many of these are there? Like, how can this is decades worth of, like, there can't be that many, can't be that variable across the country, across the population. So you hit on that for some of what we do, segmentation or whatever is less relevant, and for some stuff it must be more. How do you think about that? What are the areas where it is absolutely critical, and what are the areas where we're fooling ourselves if we're segmenting and it's really the answer's the same for everybody?
So don't take my words wrong, because I'm a strong believer in segmentation.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly pricing segmentation, and if you're not focusing in on pricing segmentation, the train's left the station on that one. When you think about marketing, personas, if you go to some of the software companies and data companies that sell you, there's 300 different potential segments, or 60 some odd. And that gets ungainly, because what you want to be doing is grouping them into relevant segments. And typically it's pretty hard to do more than 5 or 6 because you start diluting, too much. But what's important to think about is you can look at segments and say, how do I make these more profitable for me? Are they easier to sell into? And then how do I sell into each one of them? So, certainly if you look at, very clearly what, say, Progressive is doing and what Geico is imitating is selling into the young, recently homeowner, sort of the whole Progressive campaign relative to, I'm turning into my father.
Triggered from a life event.
Yes, it's all triggered from a life event. So, that's very clearly a reachable segment. One of the things as a marketer, and both a marketer and a product person, is making sure that you could actually market to those segments. Because a lot of times you'll get these psychographic segments that are much harder to market to from a media perspective because you don't buy media that way. So it becomes challenging. But when you think about sort of your, 5 segments, and this worked for me in banking as well, is it's very clear who's going to be more actionable and how do you get to that action quickly.
Yeah. Are we starting to see any real activity from the major insurance retail brands taking advantage of social media and marketing directly? I certainly get lots of pitches for black turtlenecks. They know who I am, but I don't see much from my my carriers.
How do I put this kindly, Bruce? Part of
Don't put it kindly. Don't put it kindly.
Yeah. Say I look terrible in my black turtleneck.
As I told in a board presentation once, is you don't see our ads because you're not our target.
Okay.
And some of that is, very, very true. Clearly there's companies that are, in virtually every media, it is hard to ignore. But as you think about social media can be hyper-targeted. So as you think about hyper-targeted, you or me might not fit into that. So we don't see that as often versus if you're shopping for insurance and then you go on social media, I would almost guarantee that you will see advertisements or promotions, of some sort.
I should just go do a search for auto insurance so I stop seeing all those medicine ads they shoot at me.
Very true. And, what used to always happen at the beginning of the year is if you were identified as somebody over a certain age, you got medicine as well as you got weight loss. So.
Clearly. So continuing down this path of customer, I mean, basically what you've said is, look, you really have to kind of focus it. They're going to be specific personas. You have to think about who you actually will be relevant to. And then the other way, you have to think about what actually fits within the set of products that you have. So if a company is focused on growing now, right? Especially in this time when you're omnichannel and you've kind of been describing omnichannel, how would you think about it? What do you think are some of the top ways to focus on growth, being customer centric in this process?
To me, finding the customer and servicing the customer where they want to be serviced is definitely part of the element that is necessary. So getting back to thinking about omnichannel, if I want to start online or if I want to call and do some research and then I want to go back and forth, we as an industry should be allowing that and figuring that out because consumers are always going to need help. They're not insurance experts. So our choice is either we do it perfectly online, which isn't always going to happen, or we can, do it where we have, somebody who can help them. And how do we bring that help to them in a way that's going to become, answer their questions, be relevant, purposeful, and then be able to close the sale, help them in their need, for service. Because again, people only have so much time that they're allocating to tasks. I mean, as all of us do our to-do list, we think about, I got to do all these little things today. Ooh, that's going to add up. So that's what we have to think about is how do we make this sort of fit into people's day?
Got it.
And that's, how do you think about, what's the conversation that I'm going to have with each one of them? Can it be, as short as possible, but I get to the end?
Definitely. So are we at a time, when you say meeting the customer need, are we at a time when you look at personal lines and even look at, some of the other lines of insurance, in particular and more broadly financial services, do you see the way to think about meeting that need broadening the product set? Meaning, should companies now be thinking about financial wellness? Because to get the attention of consumers nowadays is going to mean a much broader product set than just an auto I don't drive because of, a nor'easter or a pandemic. Like, where do you see the products going? Are they morphing? Is it kind of more of a broader play toward financial wellness?
I do think there is that piece of if I am comfortable with a person and I think they're educated on, on a subject, that I will keep expanding products with them. What we have to be careful about is making sure that the products fit our sales channels, or we're willing to morph our sales channels so that people see that knowledgeable person. Because if they say, well, my agent is only good for selling me insurance, they're not going to have that confidence. That person is bringing them to them what's the right piece for them. We can't make financial planners out of people who aren't financial planners.
Well, that's a super interesting point that I think we all ignore, right? We come up with strategies that fill in the grids, and they're perfect, and they match theoretical manufacturer and theoretical customer.
Right.
And you're throwing some like credibility in the middle of that of don't bother with adjacencies and all this other stuff if you're basically going to blow your credibility and or can't deliver. So you
Yes.
sort of have to stick to your knitting in a
Tell
certain
that
way.
to Bruce. Tell that to Bruce. I've been trying to get him to listen. Tell him.
No, I do think selling new products is valuable. I do think there are companies that have executed going into the different realms very, very well. But that's largely because they've established trust and then they've established expertise around it. So, I'll use USAA, which is obviously a different model, and say, people trust them for insurance, but they also trust them for their financial needs. Many times you're not serviced by the same person, but you're served by the same group.
Mm-hmm.
So again, what they're doing is, transferring the individual to the right person at the right time. So we as, product manufacturers have to think about who's our salesperson and do they have the capabilities and will be viewed as having the capabilities. Because the last thing we want is somebody selling a life product who really knows nothing much about life.
I see it all over the place as companies try to evolve their strategies of, imagining the perfect distributor who could sell everything and try to imagine it into existence. And it
doesn't happen. Well, there are actually a couple of layers, Toby, in what you're saying. Yeah, I think there are a couple of layers because what you've said is you've actually said there's trust as a product person. You're looking at what they will trust you for. But then what was also interesting is you're looking at the capability of the given channels that you have. But then you put in an operational element, which was the ability to pass through that so that you can maintain and perpetuate the trust in a way that leads to the sale. I mean, there's so many layers you put in there that I think are really powerful.
Yeah, but I think, as we think about strategies and you say you want to broaden, but then you have to say, well, how am I going to help my sales force then become credible?
Right.
Because you can't just say, well, no, I'm going to have this kind of sales force here. I'm going to have this one here. I'm going to have that one there, because that gets expensive, as well as, it becomes hard to get your customer to transition, across all of those. So, one of the strategies is, if I want to sell more products, how am I going to educate and make sure that my sales force, regardless of what kind of sales force it is trained and educated so that they can become very much that trusted partner for the end consumer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the fact that you use the word, it gets expensive, right? Because in Bruce's, rightful assessment, you paint these pie in the sky pictures that assume this nirvana, we can transform, agents, and we have unlimited money and time to do it. But in what you're saying, you are still staying focused on expense and seemingly return. So how do you balance, that growth, return on investment with kind of being, innovative and driving forward as a person who knows what it takes to bring new products to market?
So I think what you have to do is sort of lay out, what am I going to do? Make your bets and then follow through on your bets. Because, many, many times we see companies go in one direction and then they pull back way quick, or they don't, keep after it.
If it's not an instant success, they give up.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just, or they didn't think about what is it going to take to support that new product. So as you think about that process, you have to really think about, I'm going to put it in market. How am I going to sustain it in market to either make it successful or make a decision? And that's not to say that I believe in keeping after something when it's already identified as a loser. It is, you have to, call winners quick, and you also have to call losers quick. But you need to make sure when you're going in, you're thinking about, what's the sustainable, expense level that I'm going to need to make this a success? Because, if you just look at, the simple part of selling direct, on your first couple of customers, you're not going to be profitable.
Yeah.
I mean,
So you said something, call winners quick, call losers quick. So ground us in reality here. What if you are coming out, you've done your work, you've done your research, you've thought it through, and now you're committing to a market. Is there any type of time frame that you think is reasonable and a time frame that's unreasonable just even getting started? Like if you need something to prove itself in 90 days, you probably have unrealistic expectation, but if you're still hoping for it, 36 months later, you probably went too far. Do you have any, boundaries that you would set or ways of assessing that?
I think you have to think about before you go in is what's the ramp and what's the realistic ramp that you can get, acquire and have happen. We all went through, in business school, that hockey sticks are impossible.
Generally, now you tell Bruce.
I tell me.
But again, you think about, how do you build? And you also think about the world we're up against is where, an insurtech or a fintech is, trying to boost their sales as much as possible to get in there. Not all the time worrying about profitability yet, but focusing in on growth. So you have to be able to figure out, how do I move quickly, both to get into market with, an MVP product and then add on to it, and then think about, well, here's how I'm going to start selling and here's how I'm going to grow my sales, so that you have that mapped out, so that it becomes obvious to you of, no, this is not hitting, my growth expectations. Obviously you have to, ask the question, were your growth expectations realistic? But at the same point, you should be able to match a logical flow. It takes me, 4 years to get to profitability. That might not be the answer.
Well, and there's picking up on your brand metaphor, right? If you're moving if you don't have a brand, that's a certain kind of ramp. If you have to establish it, if you're moving the brand, have to establish it. Then you have all the ramps around introduction through distribution, customer awareness, et cetera. So it's, I guess to Marie's point, it's not 90 days to do all that. It's a significant commitment to make something successful. I like the way you talked about that.
It is rare to see something hit in 90 days, unless there is something that is just so word of mouth that just takes off on you. But in insurance, that's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So I think as you think about it, it is, how do I start with, who am I selling to first? If it's a group of agents, that I'm sure that they're going to be using it, and making sure that they're comfortable with using it, so that, then you become, you start off with who's your introductory group, who's your secondary group, who's your tertiary group, and just keep, expanding it, because then you'll obviously grow your sales, just because you're distributing through more channels and more options. But at the same point, you need to make sure that each one is continuing to sell. So, as you go through the process, you need to look and sort of, do the feedback loop of, are you able to sell it? What are the roadblocks you're encountering, so that you can start tinkering with the product to make sure that it's really viable, for the market.
Absolutely. We're almost out of time, and you've kind of walked us all the way from kind of customer, in market, need, product, experience, understanding those things, ramping up. How do you think about need and meeting that need, and how does that tie back? I want to throw in kind of a bonus question, which is, and you could say, Marie, I'm not answering this question, it's too complicated. But since we're almost out of time, I feel like, you got to ask the bonus question, which is, as a person who's seen this up close and you intimately know all of these levers, how do you drive alignment? How does one drive alignment with the decision makers, whether that's the senior team that has to buy in, colleagues, maybe even board? How do you drive alignment for these new products and things that you may be bringing to market that you really believe will resonate with the customer? And how do you keep that alignment, as you go through the process?
Sure. It's like anything, it's all a sales process. You have to put together, a good strategic plan of, what's the market, Why does that make sense? What's the competition in the market? Where am I going to enter? How am I going to differentiate myself?
So you're saying all the executives are logical?
Oh, I would say the ones that are really good and who have moved their companies are pretty logical. Yes, we all have emotional touch points where there is something that hits us and we say, I want you to go with that regardless. That happens. But you really have to think about then, how do you bring it back to the rational? Because dealing with, I'm going to say less rational is hard, because somebody says, well, I thought that could be gigantic. And it's like, then you just need to walk them through so that they can see the logic and then see how you get there. Because we've all had decisions where we were, involved in something that wasn't necessarily our first choice, but, you figure out then how to take it apart effectively, put it back together in a plan that's going to help everybody be successsul.
Got it.
I think I think that's just frankly business. Just, you got to read the room on, who's going to become your allies, in the process of, sort of saying, I see value for my part of the business. This is going to make sense. This is going to make, my folks, in operations do this easier, or, you could walk it along all the different people, along the way.
So you're saying, look, be reassured. The politics you've seen is really not there. It's really about the rational kind of business case, but be wise enough to ensure that that business case or the value in it is going to appeal to all the stakeholders and they can see their part in the process.
I think there's a perspective in here. The winners are rational.
That's what I heard her say. That's what I heard her say. Well, let's end with one easy question, which is, since we're out of time, which is, there's a lot of change afoot, and insurance in particular, which we spent a lot of time talking about in this conversation, to me is right in the middle of the change. What's your view? Is it optimistic? Are you excited? Like, are you, how do you see this market going and where we are in a point in time as a veteran who's kind of watched, several, business cycles? Are you hopeful, excited, mellow?
I think it's always this is an interesting time. Whenever you're at sort of a juncture, it's an opportunity. And it's an opportunity that you could either take or stay where you are. You stay where you are, you become a buggy whip. Or you will just watch your business either stay flat or decline. But, at every juncture, there's always, different paths that you can go, and you have to evaluate what path is good for you. But I think it's an interesting time, and not just in insurance, but in business, because, businesses are really thinking about tying it back, thinking about, that end customer, and thinking about how do I do things that are really going to, be a springboard and, help me take off. We're going to go out of insurance a second.
Please, go for it.
And while not everybody might like Elon Musk, the guy's a genius. And,
he's got to be good. If my mother talks about him, he's got to be amazing.
Well, you think about, how this, person goes from thinking about electric cars to thinking about SpaceX and thinking about
solar panels
and thinking about commercial rockets. And thinking about, he saw an opportunity and he, went for it. Obviously, much longer development time than any insurance product. But, he saw, he was at that juncture. And, when we see his rockets going to the space station now. So, he leapt on an opportunity and thought about it a bit differently. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. All right, Bruce, how do we do? I think
I think it was great. I think it was great. I think Toby just planted the seed. I can't just let it fall completely, which is like the last time the insurance industry came up with a new product was 1988. So don't tell me that the cycle is shorter. And that the needs, the customer needs are really evolving. So I think it's a great gauntlet, Toby, to throw out of, real innovation that's solving customer needs. I think the industry could step up to. I'd like to do a dozen of these with you, because I think the more that we do, the closer we're getting to actually sticking a knife in some of these topics and really making them come to life. This was great. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to future ones.